I was sent to Aberdeen School when I was just over 4 years old. I was with my sister, Margaret. She was at the same school. It was Aberdeen School for the Deaf. So we were there together. And we were there together until I was about 11 years old, when Margaret then came to the point where she finished school and I was left there with my chums and carried on with them. But I wasn't taught how to sign at school. It was the children who taught me how to sign. And the school itself taught the oral-only method, and we were punished if we were caught signing. So we would hide in the toilet or behind a door. We would go outside and hide in the woods to be able to communicate in sign language with each other. And even my parents were told by the school, do not communicate with your children in sign language. So out of my whole family, only my brother learned in private, in secret, how to communicate in sign language. And I think my parents regretted that they weren't able to communicate with me as a child. Especially when me and my sister were having a right old giggle and they hadn't got a clue what we were talking about.
I remember playing football whenever the air raids and the dogfights were happening above. That's when I was at the Coburn School. I remember it quite well. And I also remember, way back when we played football, in the park round about, we had these peacock chicks running around. And there was other things as well, and I can't remember what they were, but it's all changed now, it's all gone. I mean, that was back in 1944. I mean, I'd left school when I was 16 and come home. I think I must have been about 17 when I started work as a tailor. I absolutely hated it. It was a 5-year apprenticeship I had to do. It just wasn't for me. I had to do it, but I had to just get on with it. I also remember back at Coburn, whenever the air raids started, we had to be ushered down into the air raid shelters. And I remember having to wear a gas mask and been told, to be quiet. I just remember the vibration from what was happening outside, just causing my mask to vibrate. I also remember the afternoons we used to sort of meet up with the army and the RAF and play football. I remember that one of the army bosses, whenever a German aeroplane or German planes would fly over above, he'd be ringing his bell and we'd be chased down into the air raid shelter. I remember that really, really well. I say with the camps nearby, with the RAF and the army camps, we used to go and play football on a regular basis with them. And whenever we finished playing, they used to give us food. It was at the local park. It was absolutely fantastic. I remember it really, really well. The food was good. We all had a good time. It was really good.
I remember during the war, I was at Henderson Row, and we left and went over to Donaldson's Hospital. They had what felt like a cave, and every time there was an air raid, we had to go down into it. I wasn't scared. I had all my friends around me. I suppose there were some people that were a wee bit scared, but it depended on the individuals, really. We must have been down there for about an hour and a half. We had cups of tea handed round, and it was really good. But when the air raid had finished, we went outside, and that was quite disorientating. I think because of the light down in the cave where it was really dark, and then outside it was really, really bright.
I was remembering about a girl that I liked when I was at school. And I loved writing letters to her, and she used to write letters back to me. And I asked her, if I could come and visit her. She lived over in Banff. And she said, okay, so I got the bus and went across to Banff, and I was really, really disappointed, because when I got there, she was with a friend. I hadn't come to see a friend, I'd come to see her, but anyway, I had to put up with it. We wandered around Banff, and we went into the girl's house, and her mum fed me some lovely, lovely food. So I was really well looked after. And then it was time to go and get the bus back home. So I asked her, if she'd like to come and visit me in Elgin. And she kind of shrugged her shoulders as if she wasn't bothered. So I just said, that's it. I'm finished with her. So I went back home and I just put her out of my mind. Anyway, George and I went and had a game of golf. And I really enjoyed it. I was really enthusiastic about it, but it was hard work, I have to say. I was absolutely knackered at the end of it. But, we had a good time. And George asked if I'd like to go to the circus. I went, oh yeah, that'd be really good. And we were going to go with our brother Alistair. So the three of us went along. And we were standing in the queue. And I remember seeing this girl in the queue. And I kind of had a look over at her, and she looked back at me. I looked at her, she looked at me. Anyway, I remember an old man, I think he was a cobbler, he came over and he signed to me, he could sign. And he told me that she was still at school. Anyway, she went off to school, which, I never thought anything of it. And then when she came back home, I went and asked her, if she'd like to go to the cinemas. I mean, back then, that's what you did, you went to the cinema. So we went to the cinema. And at the end of the cinema, I walked her home, and then I went back to my house. I didn't push it. I was very, very patient. And I think probably about a month later, I asked her again. And she said yes. So we went back to the cinema. So we went to the cinema. And I tell you, we got a little kiss that time. Anyway. And time went on. She came over to my house and my mum would feed her. And I would go to her house and her mum would feed me. She lived quite a way away. It was over at Covesea. And we carried on seeing each other back and forward. And I think it was about 4 years. After 4 years, we got engaged. And I remember going down to Aberdeen with, her father gave us a lift down to Aberdeen to stay in a hotel there. He went on down to Dundee to go and see some family. And I remember when we arrived at the B&B, we met the receptionist, and she asked us, if we'd like a room. We'd like a double room, or 2 single beds. So I asked Annie, and Annie went, no. So we had to have separate rooms, which was fine. But at night time, I would creep down into Annie's room. We were engaged after all.
I remember the good times we used to have. We'd all go out to the dances. I went with one of my friends, a deaf man called David Hamilton. It was David that taught me how to dance, and it was really good. I'd go to the dances and I'd dance with all the boys. I'd dance with the Navy boys too. Ooh! I remember during the winter time, we would all stay in the house. I couldn't go to the dances. The reason, my mother and father wouldn't allow me. They were very religious, and they objected to me going dancing. Instead, we would visit friends in their homes. Sometimes there would be a lot of visitors in the same house, and we would sit drinking tea and enjoying the warmth of the fire. We had a nice time. Sometimes we would go to another friend's house, and when we were there, they would enjoy singing, which I couldn't join in with, obviously, because I'm deaf. Life was very quiet for me, and sometimes I did feel lonely. I used to be at home reading books or knitting. In fact, I knitted so much I was able to sell what I made. My brother would go out visiting, and sometimes he would go out walking, but he never went dancing. There were some girls who went dancing, but not me. My parents were very strict. I remember the time when I was working in the laundry rooms, and at the same time I was saving my money. I remember my mother talking about the Deaf Olympic Games. It was happening in Milan. I was really interested, and my mother said, "Oh, you've got to go." It was hard work looking after my parents when my 2 sisters were away from home. So in the end, I decided to go, and I was away for 2 weeks. Arthur Dimmock helped us to organise it all. We had the first week in Milan, and the second week was spent visiting Rome and Venice. I remember arriving in Glasgow and everyone was there. We had the chance to have a good old blether. We got on the train and it was an overnighter, and that took us to London, and we went on by plane from there and arrived in Milan. It was wonderful. There were people from all over the world. They came from France, Italy, Switzerland and Spain. It was brilliant. I think that was 1957. It was the first Deaf Olympic Games and has been a regular event ever since then. I enjoyed seeing the different sign languages, but it was quite difficult because of that. I loved the dancing, the sports, watching the runners running around the racetrack. It was good. I remember each team having their own colours. The Russians were in grey. It was brilliant learning each other's sign language. I remember the trams in Milan too. They were really cramped. But at night time the atmosphere was great and the dancing was fab. I had a really good time. It's a time I'll never forget. And I remember I'd never drunk alcohol before, so I had my first ever drink when I was there. I was quite a late starter when it came to drinking, and when I got home I remember feeling woozy. But I can't remember what it was I was drinking. It was quite nice though. I remember swapping addresses with people, and we sent postcards to each other for a while when we got home, but over time we lost contact. And I remember talking to a black American girl about different signs for the same word, and how some signs can be sexual signs. I remember talking about my sign for lemonade, and she was horrified, thinking that I was using a swear word. Another one was sign for towel. She said that was her sign for theatre. Oh, there were many more examples just like that, but I suppose it was a good laugh. When Ida was born, there was something wrong with her. There were no interpreters back then. The doctors were running backwards and forwards, but they couldn't communicate with me to tell me what was wrong. I'd have to travel from Thurso to Wick to the hospital to see Ida, and we eventually moved to Wick. My husband worked on the boats back then. That was nearly 40 years ago. Ida's 39 at the moment. She has really good speech and is a good swimmer too. In fact, she's quite a pro at swimming. I'm really happy that Ida will be 40 on her next birthday. That's in January.